This week, we will go to Module 2. Module 2 will cover in textbook Chapter 2, Introduction to C++. So here is the agenda we will talk about in this week. So we have 2 meetings. On Monday lecture, I will cover the first half until the floating point data type. Then we will work on the lab exercise 2. So then in Wednesday lecture recording, I will finish the rest of that. So now let's start for our first part. So the beginning, we will talk about last week. If you remember, at the end in the lab exercise, I asked you guys to run the chapter 1 example. So we quickly to introduce you each part in a C++ program. So quick example like this. You see we have a main function. So this one just a simple welcome message. So the most important thing in a C++ programming, you need to have a main function. This main function is mainly how we will run the program. So then you will see here in the main function, we cout hello there. So we display this welcome message to the console output. So the console output object is cout. In order to use cout, we need to include the library because cout already been implemented in another library. So we need to include that. In C++, anytime if we want to include a library, you need to do the # include. So then cout actually in the IOStream library. So for any default library in C++ compiler, we use the angle bracket, then the library name. So using namespace, we use the namespace to use. So this one I will talk about more in detail in the future chapter. So that's why here you already see we have many different operator or we say the symbol we use. So here when you see the /, that's make the line afterward will be a comment. So they won't be in part of the program. They just comment. So then we need to include the library. So then when we do the preprocessor, they will add in link those library. So then we need to have main function. So the // is comments. # is for the include keyword. So then your angle bracket, they enclose a library name. So then, right, we have the semicolon is the statement. But include never have the semicolon. Okay, so then we have the parentheses. The parentheses we will talk about in week 4 when we write a function. So just quickly to tell you, actually this one is main. We call this one is a main function. So what are functions? For now, you just consider functions just similar like what you learned in algebra for the math function. Okay, so then function is parentheses followed by the function name. After the parentheses, we define how the function works. So we have the open braces. Okay, so you have left braces and right braces. So between these braces, they are the comments we will run in the function. So then you see more, you see you have angle bracket, continue. So this one we call that a string insertion operator. They make this string go to the console output. So then here you have the double quote. So the double quote contain a string. So string usually we can say that's like a sentence. So then you can display the output. So here is a table. You can see different special character we used in that example. So you see if you have question about the meaning and how we will use that. Okay, so then if you have question, write it down. So we will talk about in our Zoom meeting. So the next for this video, I will talk about more detail is the cout object. The CL object is when we want to write information to console. So what is a console? The console actually is, did you remember last week when you run the program, you see they have the terminal display some information we write in the program. So that's what we call the console. So here your CL object, they will display the output on the computer screen. On the other hand, the computer screen we talk about is the console window. Okay, so let me write down console window. So if we want to use the CL object to display the output to the console window, the first thing, right, we need to make sure we include the IOString library. So they require the IOString library to include, just like earlier we showed you. So then whatever you want to write, for example, I want to display programming is found on the console. So then any information you want to display, we call that a string. So those information, those sentences need to be in the double quote. So they are together as a string, like the entity. So then this information I want to display to the console output. So that's why here we insert. So this one is we call string insertion operator. Okay, so angle bracket, that you see I put that information I want to display, insert to the cout. And also here we didn't talk about more in detail, but just get the idea, cout is a object. So what is object? Actually, that we won't talk about that until maybe after meeting and do some simple introduction of object. But now you just keep in mind you have object this term. So then whatever you want to display to the console, you see you insert into the cout. So the cout actually program will run and display those information, then the output to the screen. So you can see when you can using send more than one item. If you want to separate them, you see sometimes maybe you have two different strings, okay, but they just continue one by one. So when you have the first string hello, insert to the cout, then continue, you have another insertion operator. They just continue. They are not put to hello. Actually, this there will put to the cout. So you can see hello getting to cout first. Then you have there. So you write this way. Or you want to write two different statements. They are all the same. They only display hello space there's exclamation mark in the console. But the different thing is what? You see here, you have one cout, then you have one semicolon. So semicolon is we say, yeah, I need to mark that so that we have a space. So semicolon actually is we say end of the statement. Okay, so you see cout start one statement. So then you want to insert one by one, then you finish. But if we want to put in two different lines for two different statements, so then you need to have two different cout. Okay, because each semicolon, each statement. So when you have the cout, I know what you want to do. Okay, so then if you continue to the insertion, they will do at one time to insert to the cout. But then if we want to separate in two lines, that's okay, but the semicolon is required. So more example, actually you see like this. Okay, so then we only display programming is space fun. Okay, so you can write it down. So see here, not only just see the PowerPoint file on my lecture, you should just write to your program. Okay, so just like you have your chapter 1 example earlier, right? So you just add these two lines, then you run your program again. You see how they display at the end. Okay, and also last week, you also see this one, right? When we ask you to display the how many work, how many hours they work, so then we display the information. So then at the end, you will see insertion function have a ENDL followed by that. So the ENDL is a manipulator. They will have start a new line of the output. What does that mean? That means after you have programming is, you put it in cout, right? So then if you continue with the end L, usually I say end of line, they will put new line to the programming is. So on the other hand, if you copy these two lines to your program you run, you will see they will display programming is, then nothing. So then fun actually is start from the second line. So that's one way sometimes we want to format correctly for our output, right? For example, you see like your homework assignment, you want to display at the end your price, then you don't want to have this in the same line, right? So then you want to have a new line, then you display your sales tax, then you want to have a new line to display your total. So that's how you add a new line. You have two different ways to do that. You can either do this way, put another insertion end of line, or you can put them in the same, you can put them in the same string. You see here, I'm using the same string, right? So then in the string, your double quote, if you have a \n, so this \n actually mean the new line. Okay, so they kind of similar to end of line, but end of line is a comment. You need to do insertion. But here, if you want to in your string, you want to put a new line, so you do the \n. So then they will still these two lines. If you copy over to your program, they will display programming, then new line, then second line found. So / is the new line. So then the other one also sometimes you will see the \t. So \t actually \t is the tab. So what is the tab? Tab sometimes they have 4 space or 8 space. So they give you some spaces. So that's the cout object. So at the end, before I finish this this click, let me also talk about include directive. So this one actually we already talked about that. So when you have a pound sign include, we call that the directive. They will insert the content of another file. So iostream earlier we showed you actually there are another file we call library. So if you have default library file from the compiler, we're using the square bracket. Otherwise, sometimes we have user-defined header file. Then we're using the double quote. Okay, so that's the different way. So sometimes you will see, sometimes when you see the include, just like we have include iostream, they have .h header file. Okay, sometimes I don't know why I type something on this, the screen capture, they kind of stop for a little bit. So I hope you can hear what I said earlier. So I just show you when you do the include angle bracket, that's mean the inside this file, they are from the default library. But sometimes you can do the double quote. So double quote actually the user-defined header file. So we won't do this class for the user-defined header file, but in your next advanced C++ class, we will talk about how to implement the header file. So that's our first video lecture. So don't forget, anytime you need something, post the video. Anytime you feel not sure, post the video and read the whole PowerPoint slide. I won't go line by line, so I only talk about the most important thing. If you have any question, write it down.